Good evening, guys. Now, tonight's B, we're discussing PT and OT therapists changing professions, going into adult geriatric care for PT and OT. So, let's say somebody transitions from pediatrics, from pediatric PT to geriatrics or pediatric um, pediatrician to adult elderly care. So we're going to get into that for tonight's discussion. Here we go. I made a little essay for you. Hope this gives some people some insight as to these people's professions. Okay, here we go. Crossing the Threshold, a deep narrative on transitioning occupational therapy practice from schools to adults and geriatric care. Occupational therapists often describe their careers as a series of rooms they walk through, each one shaped by the people they serve, the system they navigate, and the stories they witness. For many practitioners, the first room is a school, bright, bustling, filled with the hum of childhood. It's a place where occupation is woven through crayons, playgrounds, handwriting worksheets, and quiet triumph of a child fastening a zipper for the first time. School-based OT is intimate, developmental, and hopeful. It's a practice built on potential. But there comes a moment, sometimes gradual, sometimes sudden. A therapist feels the pull toward another room entirely. This room is quieter, the lighting is softer, the pace is slower, the stakes are higher. It's the world of adult and geriatric care. Where occupation is measured not in milestones, but in meaning, the ability to rise from a chair without fear, to prepare a familiar meal, to remember a daughter's name, to remain at home for one more season. The transition from school-based OT to adult or geriatric practice is not simply a change in setting. It is profound. It is a profound shift in perspective, identity, and purpose. It is a crossing of threshold into a domain where the work of occupation becomes deeply intertwined with autonomy, dignity, and the realities of aging, the call to change, why therapists move toward adult and geriatrics. A, pop- a population in motion. The demographic landscape of the United States is transforming. Adults over 65 re- represent the fastest growing segment of the population, and with longevity comes complexity, chronic disease, cognitive decline, frailty, and the desire to age in place. The system the systems built to support older adults, home health, long-term care, primary care, hospice are straining under the weight of need. Occupational therapists are uniquely positioned to respond. Their expertise in routines, environments, and meaningful activity is priceless. Is precisely what older adults require to remain independent, to remain independence and identity. The profession is being called to step into this widening gap, not as technicians, but as guides. A broader clinical horizon. The school-based OT is rich in sensory integration, fine motor development, and educational participation. Adult practice expands the horizon. Demographically, it encompasses neurologic rehabilitation, chronic disease management, dementia care, mental health, low vision, cancer survivorship, home modifications, and end of life support. For many therapists, this expansion is invigorating. It offers intellectual challenge, interdisciplinary collaboration, and the opportunity to influence health system policy, especially in areas like aging in place, long term reform, and palliative care. It is a chance to work at the intersection of medicine, environment, and human meaning. The first home visit. The first home visit is often the moment where a therapist realizes they have truly crossed into a new room. The house is small, a single story ranch with a sagging porch and a wind chime that rings softly in the July heat. Inside, the air smells faintly of lavender and old books. The client, a retired librarian named Margaret, sits in her recliner, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She smiles. When the therapist enters, but her eyes barely a flicker of fear. I fell last week, she says, quietly in the kitchen. I didn't tell my daughter. The therapist kneels beside her, noticing the details: the narrow doorway, the loose rug, the cluttered counter where Margaret still insists on preparing her own tea. In that moment, the therapist understands that the work is no longer about fine motor skills or classroom participation. It's about safety, autonomy, and the fragile balance between independence and vulnerability. The home becomes a clinical text. Every object, a sentence, every hazard, a paragraph, every routine, a story waiting to be understood. The transition itself, how therapists cross the threshold, reframing the lens. The first step in transitioning to adult practice is the conceptual school-based OT focuses on participation in education. Adult OT focuses on the participation in life. The occupational therapist practice framework OTPF4 provides the bridge. Health management, ADLs, IADLs, community, mobility, cognition, and environmental adaptation becomes the new anchors. Building building competence in adult conditions. The learning curve is real, but it is navigatable. Therapists often begin by studying stroke, TBIs, MS, Parkinson's, dementia, and cognitive decline, diabetes, cardiac disease, pulmonary disease, arthritis, low vision, cancer, survivorship, serious mental illness, and behavioral health, mastering home and community based care. Adult and geriatric OT is deeply environmental. Home safety, fall prevention, accessibility, and aging in place strategies are central. Therapists learn to see the home not as a backdrop, but a therapeutic partner, a place where independence is either supported or undetermined, undermined. The man, the man who wanted to cook again. His name was Robert, and he used to be a chef. Now he lives alone in a smaller apartment with a galley-style kitchen and a refrigerator covered in magnets from restaurants he once worked in. Parkinson's disease has made his hands tremble and he has stopped cooking entirely. It's too dangerous, he says. I don't trust myself. The therapist watches him as he stands at the counter, his posture stiff, his breath shallow. She asks him what he misses most. The sound, he said. The sound, he says. The sound of onions hitting a hot pan. Together they began small, stabilizing the cutting board, using adaptive knives, rearranging the kitchen so everything is within reach. The first time he sautés onions again, tears fill his eyes. The therapist realizes that this moment, this simple fragment moment is as profound as any milestone achieved in a school. Occupation is not just activity, it is identity. The emotional landscape, what it feels like to make the transition. Transitioning into adult practice is not only technical, it is emotional. The work is heavier. The stories are deeper. The victories are quieter, but more profound. A therapist may spend an afternoon teaching a man with Parkinson's how to safely transfer from his recliner and realize that his single skill will determine whether he can remain at home. She may help a woman with dementia relearn the steps to making tea, knowing that the ritual is a thread connecting her to her former self. She may sit with a dying patient and help them find comfort in familiar routines, even as the world narrows around him. The woman who forgot her daughter's name. Her name is Lila, and she has Alzheimer's disease. During one session, she pauses mid sentence, her brow furrowing. This is a girl, she says. She visits me. I think she's important. The therapist gently prompts her, guiding her thought. A memory book they created. Together. Photographs, names, routines, anchors in a sea of forgetting. When Lila reaches the page with her daughter's picture, her face softens. That's her, she whispers. She loves tulips. The, the therapist feels a quiet ache, not for the memory loss, but for the memory momentarily found. This is the work, not restoring what can't be, what cannot be restored, but preserving what can still be held. The ethical landscape, what it means to serve adults and elders, the ethics of autonomy. Working with older adults requires a deep respect for autonomy, even when autonomy is fragile. The therapist must learn to balance safely with dignity, risks with self-determination, the ethics of time. In schools, time stretches forward. In geriatric care, time is finite. Therapists must learn to work within the boundaries of life that may be nearing the end. The ethics of environment. The home becomes a moral space. Every grab bar, every lighting change, every rearranged cabinet is an ethical act. A decision about how a person will live, move, and be safe. The last season. His name is Thomas, and he is dying. The therapist visits him in hospice, where the room is dim and quiet. He no longer wants exercises or strategies. He wants to sit by the window and watch the birds. The therapist helps him adjust his chair, supports his posture, and places a soft blanket across his lap. Is this enough? He says. In that moment, the therapist understands. The occupation is not always about doing doing. Sometimes it's about being. being comfortable, being present, being connected to the world in the ways that still matter. This is occupational therapy too. The deeper truth, this transition is not a leap. It is a continuum. The most important truth is that school-based OT and adult OT are separate worlds. They are points along the same continuum of human occupation. The skills that help a child participate in school are the same skills that help an older adult, maintain an independence, dignity, and identity. The environments change, the goals evolve, but the heart of the work remains consistent. Transitioning into adult or geriatric practice is not about leaving something behind. It's about stepping into the next chapter of what occupational therapy and the therapist herself is capable of becoming. Okay, guys, those are your shows for tonight. And we'll see everybody tomorrow for shows in the afternoon, about around 2 or so. So until then, Gator Wellness, take care, folks.